This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 488 for the week of April 18th, 2021. Well, hello there. Welcome back to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast,
an extension of the all-encompassing Dragon Ball and beyond fan site,
Kanzenshuu.
That is correct. I had to question myself there for a second. We cover anything and everything Dragon Ball in hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. We do a podcast around these parts. And a little bit. My name is Mike. You may see me around as Vegito EX. I am joined by a first-time podcast guest, but at this point, it feels like you're just part of the family, and no one knows at this point. So it's like I have to introduce you, but that's strange because you've been such an ingrained part of the Kanzenshuu family for months on end at this point. Zenpai, how would you like to introduce yourself?
So, Zenpai, real name José. I'm like a Portuguese fan of the website for about 10 years now, and never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I would end up here in the podcast one day.
Aw, that's great. So, man, I wish I had the foresight to look up exactly when it was, but we were all talking one day, wiki editors and site admins and stuff. And we're like, let's get some new people because we're working on so much stuff. And we were kind of concentrating on Japanese things because, yeah, we got Julian, we got Stacy, and Ian helps out too. And everyone's busy. And sometimes it's like, hey, I need a sentence. Can someone just do a sentence? And time zones are crazy and who knows? And maybe it's important, maybe it's not. But it's always nice to have someone just look at it and go, I'll get to that. Or, yes, this is important. Let me do it right now. And your name kind of popped up there. I had been casually familiar with you for a while. You've been, like you mentioned, a fan of the site and the podcast and the series for quite some time. And I threw your name out there and folks were like, yeah. So we asked you and you're like, yeah. And I think later that day, you're already at work on stuff. It was fantastic, man. So I got to say thank you, in retrospect, but also ahead to everything we're going to work on. Thanks for becoming part of the extended Kanzenshuu family.
Thank you for welcoming me into the family. I would consider myself maybe I will just say this unashamedly, maybe a fanboy of the website. So giving me the opportunity to contribute to the fantastic work you've been doing, or maybe I should say we've been doing now, and also practice my Japanese in the meantime. So it's been great.
Well, and that's the thing. So we're looking for, someone who can translate things, but I'm also always looking for, I need some global perspective on things. We're very focused on the Japanese version of the franchise, and that's never going to change. We're also looking at it from a pretty much exclusive American viewpoint, but that's not global. That's not the goal of the website. And so you kind of checked off all these boxes for me of what I was looking for. And you ended up being a good person, which is like the first checkbox, but usually the last checkbox is like, oh God, we should make sure they're not a wacko. But I've just been so happy it's worked out. So why do I have you here? So here's what I want to do with you on the podcast today. One, it's kind of like a general introduction. I want to bring you in front of everyone. I'm all about elevating voices and bringing, again, the global perspective to the larger community. I think that's important. I want to talk about your fandom because, again, we've talked with folks from abroad and we focused on Japan in addition to America, but Portugal has a very different background with this series than anywhere else that we've kind of talked about so far. I guess 3 on the checklist is, well, you're very much multilingual. So you have you can read anything we throw at you, which I'm always very appreciative for. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you are, kind of stemming off of that, are doing with us. Recently, we put up a translation that Julian had done the bulk of years ago. It was something I always wanted to get done, and he just didn't have the time to do kind of like the nitty-gritty cleanup work that no one really wants to do. And you put your hand up, you're like, I'll do it. So that recently went up, and we have a very, very gigantic translation that now is on my shoulders to wrap up and get up. So I feel like talking to you on the podcast is maybe that kick in the ass to get me going and wrap it up. I had all the PSD files open today. I was like, oh, right, this is what I was working on. So let's kind of take it all the way back to the beginning for you. Hanging out, living, Portugal, good times. How's Dragon Ball into your life?
Okay, so Dragon Ball into my life, I still remember the very first episode that I watched because just in preparation for the podcast, I've been digging a little bit into the actual dates, and I found out that it's very difficult to find actual dates for Dragon Ball's broadcast in Portugal. But it started around either November or December 1995.
Okay, so you're actually kind of like right there with the American beginnings of the show. So we had Funimation start the American broadcast in 95. So where was Portugal at that point in their broadcast?
We started with Dragon Ball Episode 1 at the end of 1995.
Okay.
And then we finished somewhere in mid-1997 all of Dragon Ball and all of Dragon Ball Z and all of Dragon Ball GT as well. We aired the whole thing through. No skips, no nothing, just pure Dragon Ball.
So that's really interesting. So not only did you start at the actual beginning, but it still would have been somewhat contemporary with Japan because GT was 96, 97. And so you just started, just head down, go, just run through the whole thing.
I mean, Dragon Ball has quite a history in Portugal. It was like crazy. And also, let me just correct myself because I mentioned that we ended in mid-1997. That's actually not true because GT ended somewhere in 1998.
Yeah, it would have had to because it was still going.
Yeah. Dragon Ball Z finished in 1997.
Got it. I guess I kind of want to address this now. The Portuguese dub is the subject of what's the tactful way to put it?
A lot of discussion.
Engaged criticism online, perhaps. Give us a little background of the Portuguese dub.
Okay, so the Portuguese dub, let's say, first of all, it only had 7 actors for the whole thing.
So Funimation in 1999, got it. Perfect, yep.
So you can imagine the kind of product, especially since you just compared it to your own dub. Yeah, and I mean, it was, first of all, we didn't even have our own scripts. We basically inherited the French scripts.
Well, that happened a lot over there, right?
I think it had something to do with AB Group actually having the rights for the entirety of Europe or most of Europe. I'm not sure. So we also inherited their scripts and we inherited their video masters, censorship and all. And that's one of the reasons why we never actually had some of the original terms. Like, for example, we don't have the Portuguese fandom that just watched the Portuguese dub doesn't have the word Saiyan. It just has Guerreiros do Espaço, which means, literally translated, is space warriors.
Yeah, we saw that a lot in some of the merchandise that would make its way to America before Funimation had gotten to things. We would see things come from Mexico, from Europe, and we would get some of that terminology. We're like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, and also one of the other weird quirks of having the French script is that, for example, Goku's Saiyan name, Kakarot, they basically decided that they didn't want to pronounce it, so they just went with cachalot in Portuguese cachalot, which means a sperm whale, because it kind of sounds similar, I guess.
Okay.
So as I grew as a fan, I just looked back at all this stuff and thought, what the hell were they thinking? But
so in many ways, that really doesn't sound too far off. I mean, you have this dubbing company who has this series thrust upon them or decides to pick it up, and they don't have the resources that some of the other larger scale outfits have, and they just run forward with it, and they make up their own stuff, and the people who watched it and liked what they watched. And decades later, that's still the version they identify with?
Oh yeah, the Portuguese dub definitely has a lot of fans.
Yeah.
Because I went to quite a lot of anime conventions over here, and one of anime conventions over here, one of their favorite guests is just calling in the Portuguese dub actors.
Yeah.
And they're quite happy to go because well, for better or worse, they got really happy that they are the Portuguese dub actors.
Mm-hmm.
So they got actually a little bit of a diva complex, but anyway.
Another thing that sounds very similar. Anyway.
And I mean, the stories they tell us, they're just absolutely crazy.
I believe it.
For instance, there's one thing here in Portugal that's very famous on YouTube, which is the pearls. We call them the pearls, which is, since Dragon Ball, even with the censorship that the French made to their masters, that we inherited, even then, it was still considered pretty violent. So one of the ways they went about softening it up was ad-libbing in some jokes.
Got it.
And people just ate it all up.
Yeah.
They loved it. And they even made like a lot of compilations of those pearls on YouTube, and people just lap it up. And actually it might have been in a way a good thing, just because some of people that might not have gotten into the series actually got into the series precisely because of that.
You know, we hear that a lot through things like Abridged. As you talk about the dub, and I've certainly watched some of it in the past and talked with people about it, it does feel like this halfway between a real dub and a parody dub that this group of people, this company got, and just it ended up on TV. And
pretty much,
you know, people like what they like.
I guess. I mean, I have memories of talking to this dude I knew that lived in my street that was a little bit older than me. And even back then, I was like 10 or something. Mm-hmm. We were talking about Dragon Ball for some reason. And even back then, I told him, I know that this is not a good dub. I think they're just being disrespectful of the original. Mm-hmm. I'm just watching it because it's the only thing I know.
It's what there is, yeah. It's of course
the only thing we have access to.
So then tell me about that. So that's what you have. It airs on TV. Did you get any kind of home release of that at all? Or was it just it aired and you recorded it? That was that?
We had, I don't believe so. At least the only home releases that we saw were of the movies. We had the entirety of the movies, mm-hmm. and we even had 12 and 13 air as a double feature on movies. I sadly didn't get to go because of family reasons, so I was super sad that they promised me I would go, but it was complicated, so I never actually managed to go.
Got it.
And the only time I actually saw Dragon Ball in cinemas over here was when they premiered Broly, which was the first...
Well, you finally got back around to it. All right, so then where I'm going with that is, so tell me about the discovery phase of fandom, because everyone who does what we do, they all have this phase where it's, all right, I know what I'm watching is not the show, quote unquote, the show. I need to learn more about the show. How do I learn more about the show? So bring me through that discovery phase of your fandom.
Well, to be honest, I mostly just watched the show when it aired on TV. And I had actually I just remembered that there was one of the series actually did have a home release because I have them all, which is GT. GT actually got released in its entirety on VHS.
It's short enough. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, it was just the movies. And after a while, I remembered that I had GT, I had the memories of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, mm-hmm. and I had the manga, which they released here in Portugal, and it was also very shoddily translated from the Spanish version.
Yeah.
The Spanish version is pretty good, actually, mm-hmm. but translation, not so much.
Yeah, I've seen that offered up for folks over in Europe. They're like, well, if you can get the Spanish version, like if you know enough, you can just go read that. Maybe this is Portuguese versus Spanish. Can you get by? Like, is it doable?
Perfectly. It's extremely similar.
Yeah.
I personally, if it's like I can read Spanish just fine. I studied it in university, mm-hmm. But it's not really the kind of language I like to read in. So I either go Portuguese or English, or I just go straight up to the Japanese original.
Sure.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a little bit of a home release. You've got a not so great manga. Keep going.
Yeah. And basically, whenever I was bored and had nothing to do, I read the manga a lot. But then my fandom started to wane down a little bit. The only thing we had, at least I had, for about from 2000 to 2010 were the video games, mm-hmm. Like Budokai and all of the Budokais, then Budokai Tenkaichi, the ones from PS3 and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I just ate them all up.
That's also pretty common. Is that was, and Bandai Namco has cited Europe as a very big part of that era. The sales, they didn't. Maybe we'll talk about this. Some of the stuff you were translating, like they never even considered the international market, and the fact that it blew up to the degree it did was shocking to them. It's shocking to me that it was shocking to them. It just shows how in a bubble folks can be over there. I hope we're all right. Maybe let me scale that back a little bit. Yeah. All right. So the games really kind of like reinvigorated your fandom.
We had the games, and I was playing them more as kind of nostalgically, because I always liked Dragon Ball, but my love for the series was dwindling a little bit.
Got it.
But the games kept it a little bit alive inside of me, that passion.
Okay.
And then the one thing, when I watched anime, one thing I really, really, really always hated was filler. And then Dragon Ball Kai got announced, and I was like, oh boy, Dragon Ball with no filler. And then I waited for it all to finish so I could watch it all in one go.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got cancelled. And I was like, panic. Oh my God.
Well, hold on. So were you watching in Japanese at this point, or was it a Portuguese dub of Kai?
We never had a Portuguese dub of Kai.
Got it.
It aired on TV once. I don't even know if it aired in its entirety, but it was subtitled. And then it got cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like in panic mode, like just trying to search for what happened. Why did it get cancelled?
Mm-hmm.
And I searched all over the internet, and I found this website. Kanzenshuu EX. What the hell is this? And then they had a podcast which actually talked about the end of Kai. And I was like, let me check these guys out. Oh, wait, these guys actually know what they're talking about. Let me check some of their other stuff.
I have vivid memories of recording that episode in this very room, in this very basement of this very house. That's so fun. Yeah, we certainly had an uptick of global international visitors around the time of Kai. Kai was such an international product, and as Cellar came to a close and the music fiasco happened, people just wanted to know what the hell happened. I think we just had a great SEO title on that podcast episode. It was like, what the hell happened to Dragon Ball Kai? we got all you folks coming in from that.
Pretty much. I mean, to be honest, I think the entire history surrounding Dragon Ball Kai is vastly more interesting than Dragon Ball Kai itself.
Agreed, 1,000%. Yeah, like I want to write a book about it. It's so interesting. Even though we've covered it so extensively, I feel like I just want to get it all down chronologically again. It's so interesting, and we learn more and more about it as we do. Again, we'll get to some of your translation stuff where we go one direction. We think we're going to get this, and we end up hearing more about Kai that we didn't know. We always used to joke Kai is the gift that keeps on giving, the gifts we don't want, but in many ways it's pretty good. So that brings you to the 2010s, really, as Kai kind of gets going and comes to an end. Tell me more at this point in your life about not just fandom, but also language for you.
So 2010s, so in terms of the fandom, that was around when I discovered the website. So that was 2011. And I started listening to the podcast, and I was really enjoying myself. And then I saw that you had a lot of features, a lot of translations. Your database was huge. And I thought, Then I started watching the series for the first time in Japanese. I think I saw Dragon Ball a little bit before that, and then I was like, okay, Dragon Ball is watched in Japanese for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time for Kai, and then Kai got cancelled. So you know the rest of the story. So then I watched Boo through Z, and then GT, and as that was happening, I was just keeping up with the website, listening to your podcast when I was going to college and stuff like that. And this was around the time when I finished my master's. And it was 2011, so we were smack dab in the middle of the crisis here in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a job was kind of hard. And then I talked to my mother at the time, and I kept saying, because I had just gotten into anime at the time, and I kept saying, because I come from translation background, so I already knew English and French and Spanish, and also studied German. And I kept telling, you know what? I'm going to study Japanese someday. And I just kept it at someday I will study Japanese. Someday.
Sure.
And then I finished the master's degree, and she told me, why don't you actually go learn Japanese? And I was like, you know what? I will.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, sounds good. And turns out I went to classes. I got along just fine. And sadly, the more the lessons progressed, the less people wanted to keep up. And there was a time when I could no longer have lessons, so I just called up my teacher and said, you know what, I want to keep moving forward, but there's not enough people. Will you tutor me? And basically she said, sure, I will tutor you. And according to her own words, she didn't even expect me to carry on beyond like 1 or 2 months. And I kept on going until I finished my N2 for 5 years. So,
How does that make you feel? Like she didn't have enough faith in you to keep going initially?
I think she didn't have enough faith in the Portuguese students because she kept seeing people drop out because they were kind of tired.
It's pretty common. I mean, that was me in college. I fell off. It's one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't do it all throughout college.
So yeah, that stuff happens. And I think that she was just a little bit jaded. She didn't really believe that people would have enough motivation to go on until the end. And I went at least until N2 because I believed it was a good level.
Yeah.
And I'm still considering maybe taking N1 one day. Right now I'm just doing a little bit of more practical studying, like translating stuff and reading a lot more stuff and stuff like that. I don't exactly say I will never do it. Maybe one day.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. It's something I've talked with Julian about pretty extensively here on the show before. People may hear this N1, N2, N3, N4, N5. They might not know what it is. It's a standardized test, basically. Like you either hit it or you don't, and you're granted this title, right?
Pretty much. So the Japanese language proficiency test is the most famous standardized test for foreign Japanese learners. So you have N5, which is the lowest level, which you only need 100 kanji. Then N4, you need 300. N3, you need 600. And N2, you need 1000. Then for N1, you need all 2,126, I believe that's the number, of the Joyo kanji, which means the common use kanji. Right. Which is insanely high.
Right. But that's like, all right, you're going to read a newspaper, you're going to watch TV, you're going to live your life. That's like you are getting by. You are, for all intents and purposes, fluent in whatever's likely going to come your way in written form at that point.
Oh, yeah. Basically, N2 is already considered professional level. N1 is mastery.
Yeah.
It's like pretty much there isn't much that can make you trip up in Japanese.
Right. Well, here's the key thing is that I think I say this all as a non-translator. I am the overlord, the project manager, I don't know shit. And that puts you in a very dangerous place sometimes. There's a lot of people come in at some of those lower levels or even some entry-level college classes. And what's dangerous is they don't know what they don't know, and they think they know more than they really do. And a lot of people I've seen, not necessarily within our own community, but abroad, hit something like an N2 and then think, I've got it. Like I'm a translator. At that point, you're shaking your head. Like, I know that's not true. So let's talk a little bit about that difference between kind of like the book smarts versus the more colloquial kind of actually getting the meaning of something. Again, I've talked with Julian and Jake quite a bit about this. The art of translation. There's always a thread of the day on Twitter. There was something just today going back and forth over the use of, I think, sus and a translation. And again, the people who don't know what they don't know have a problem with that. And then you get the people who have been around the block for a little bit, like, that's a totally accurate take on what's being said there. So tell me from your perspective a little bit, especially as you have really gone knee deep here translating stuff for Kanzenshuu. What's the difference between watching the show and then taking something, whether it's I guess specifically more an interview, because you get someone like Torishima that you've translated the words of. What's the difference there?
Well, it's Japanese. It's extremely is a language that's extremely context based. So you need to look at the text very carefully to see what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And even at my level, it's very hard sometimes to figure out what's going on. Sometimes I'm looking at this text and I have to do like a double take, or actually ask one of my colleagues. It's like, what do you think this means? Or sometimes I ask some of the other Japanese speakers on the websites, like, what do you think they're meaning here? And it can be rough. I mean, obviously, the more you do it, the better you get at kind of understanding what they're trying to get at.
Of course, yeah.
But book smarts will only take you so far. That's, I think, one of the things I'm really grateful to my tutor is that I spent like sometimes 1 month just dissecting one newspaper article for lessons. Yeah. But even then, even though we wanted to get further and further, she always spent half of our lessons just talking to me. And that's the thing that made me get really comfortable in actually talking to people, because when I went to Japan, she actually gave me an order, not a request, an order. If you go to Japan, you will not, I repeat, you will not speak in English to any single person you find. And I was like, sure. And then I had 18 hours of no sleep because of the plane, because the trip is like super huge. Mm-hmm. And it was raining. I was tired. I was sleepy. And I had to show this person my passport. And I was like, I really don't want to think in Japanese right now. This was like 4 years ago, mm-hmm. but I will try my best. And then I just spoke in Japanese the entire time with everybody. And I was like, I came back and I was like, yeah, teacher, I'm super proud of myself. Please compliment me.
So funny. So tell me more about the difference between watching a show and the words from someone on the page. You already mentioned things like very context dependent. You're not necessarily even going to get the subject of what they're talking about sometimes.
I mean, when you're watching a show with subtitles, it feels like you have it all done for you. Mm-hmm. Like there's no real ambiguity. And the subject is there, everything is laid out super clearly. But when you're actually looking at it with no subtitles, or you're just looking at the raw text, you need to be able to understand what the people are talking about. And sometimes it can be super obvious what you're talking about, but sometimes like, what the hell are they getting at here? Because some words can be really ambiguous and the context is also not super clear. And you kind of realize that most translations are in interpretations as well, mm-hmm. because it's kind of impossible in some cases. There are some other cases where the context is pretty obvious, so if you get it wrong, it's actually an error. But there are some other cases where it's like, okay, I have quite a few options. Let's just pick the one that's the most plausible, mm-hmm. and you go with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you really notice that until you actually learn Japanese and you try to interpret it by yourself, how much it depends on on a little bit of insider knowledge, at least to a point.
Sure.
Of what the person is talking about.
Yeah. And you probably get later in the same, if it's an interview, for example, you get later in the interview, you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about earlier. I got to go back and change what they were talking about because I totally misread that.
Exactly. You essentially need to go back. There was one time during the Torishima translation where I was like, okay, they're talking about the new series here. This was 2019. Are they talking about Kai or are they talking about Super? Because right. Kai can hardly be called a new series, but the more I read, it's like, no, this is absolutely unambiguous. It's Kai.
I want to talk about that right now. This is a translation that is not up on the site yet. You have it totally done. And I'm at the point where I had it totally pasted and ready to post. I'm like, I want to do translations of all the slides too, and not just your text translations. I'm going to actually go in there and do the images themselves. And so I hold everyone up as I'm working on this. But I think it's important because I feel like that's also the kind of thing when we do our translations on the site. I really like how our translations are presented, but I also think it's important when it's something like that. We don't typically do scanlations of things, we're text only, but I think the formatting and the flow of something is important to also replicate. And so when our slides are a part of the actual interview that was posted, I feel like it's important to include those. And also kind of like as is, like I still want the same little clip art that they had there. Like I feel like that kind of brings out the atmosphere of how it was originally presented. But anyway, that's kind of like a tangent. I want to talk about something very concrete from it because I don't want to say we had arguments about it, but we certainly had some conversations about it. And it's a very particular phrase from something that's being discussed here. And so this interview translation, the reason I had thrown it out there is because I saw it referenced on the Japanese Wikipedia page for the first Budokai. I was like, oh, so clearly there's some cool like development tidbits, how it came to be. And I saw Torishima was in there. Like, well, he knows what he's talking about. Like, there's clearly something good in here. Let's go check it out. And so I threw it out there. I'm like, hey, can anyone just like scan this and pick out what the cool tidbits are so we can put them on our own page, because that's important to include. And you get going, you're like, I'm going to translate the whole thing. Like, all right, that sounds great. I would love for you to do that. The key part of the story, and I love this, and you'll be able to eventually read this whole thing. And again, by recording this podcast, hopefully I get my ass in gear here. Bandai was working on the game, and they were talking with Toei, but they weren't talking with Shueisha. Dragon Ball is ultimately owned by Shueisha. Shueisha needs to approve things. Shueisha didn't see what they were working on. So in comes Torishima after they've been working on the game for what, like a year at this point? I forget.
I think it was like around a year or something.
Okay.
Yeah. All of that conversation happened quite late in the game's development. I believe I haven't looked at the translation in a while.
Yeah.
But I think they even delayed the release, and then it turns out that it was going to be released alongside the Kanzenban.
Yeah.
And the Dragon boxes were also coming, so they thought, "Hey, perfect!
This is perfect. This is serendipitous." But the problem for development was a year in. Torishima came in and said, yeah, throw it all out, everything, start over." So Panda's like, what are you talking about? We spent a year working on this game. What do you mean throw it out? And it turns out that this is kind of like a regularly recurring thing between Bandai and their game partners, where after a period of somewhere like 5 to 10 years, the partners will just get complacent with what they're working on and what they're developing, and the same old shit comes out year after year. We most recently saw this probably in the PS3 era, right before they transitioned to Xenoverse, because we got Raging Blast 1, Raging Blast 2, Ultimate Blast, sales just, plummeting. And so they reinvigorated the series, like a new direction, brought it back to DIMS actually at that point. But this was back in Budokai. So Torishima says, throw it all out. And here's where I'm getting with the translation. Do you remember what the phrase was in Japanese off the top of your head?
The one we were discussing?
Yeah.
It's the complete supervision suspension.
Right. The complete supervision suspension. That doesn't make any fucking sense. So part of my job, which is not really a job, but as I'm reviewing translation stuff, I'm looking at it from a non-native reader. And even in Japanese, what little I know, I look at it in Japanese, I'm like, I understand what that means. I look at the direct English translation of that and I go, that doesn't make any fucking sense. We need to make this make sense, like get the point across rather than the actual meaning of the words, if that makes any sense. Because what's happening here was not that Shueisha said we are no longer going to supervise. They weren't suspending their supervision of the projects that Bandai was doing. Instead, they suspended all work entirely that was not being directly supervised by them. Like this, even trying to explain it doesn't make any sense. Ultimate meaning is kind of what I already said. Like Torishima came in, said, stop, start over. Like that's kind of like what we're getting at. And to get that across in English was difficult. And what made it even more difficult was that it was baked into some of the slides as well. Like, all right, so I can't just change it here. I got to change it in all of the graphics. This is the kind of thing that I think is really interesting from my perspective, from the behind the scenes perspective. And I hope ends up being transparent if you don't listen to this podcast, for example. Like you just load up the page. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is a new translation. Let me go read it. I want you to be able to read it and understand what was being said in Japanese without having to listen to this conversation about us arguing over these, like 4 or 5 kanji.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think that was the page that I took the longest to translate, just because I was trying really, really hard to make it come across to be an actual translation, and to make it seem clear to the reader what it was talking about. And I thought about making it a little bit, translating it a little bit more creatively, But then I kind of chickened out, and I thought, maybe I don't want to get too far apart from what he's saying, especially since he says it so often.
Yeah, I mean, they put it up in big red letters on their slides. Like, Torishima came in and said this to us. Like, yeah, it's tough. And I guess I would say that I typically don't get that involved in the editing of a translation, but I do sometimes for, something comes up, something like that. I just want to make sure that it makes sense to people who come in and read it. Especially, I feel like that was such a key part of it, where Shueisha really came in and said, shut this shit down. What are you doing? Like, no. I just thought that was so fascinating from a behind the scenes perspective.
I mean, I think after the discussion that we had, I do believe that it became clearer.
Yeah.
Just because maybe I couldn't really get to it just because I was a bit too close to it. So
sure. Yeah.
An external perspective was maybe needed.
Yeah.
And I think it came out really well. The rephrasing of the term, and after you talked to me, it really was necessary, because since not only does it come up on the slide, they actually look at the title and they say, wow, now that sounds scary, doesn't it? Right. So, yeah, you needed to convey not only the meaning, but also the impact. As you said before, you were just saying, could you just please skim this just to see if there's any interesting tidbits? Yeah. And at first I was like, yeah, I'm just going to put here some tidbits and stuff. And then it's like, oh, this paragraph sounds interesting. Okay, I will translate everything. And then next paragraph, ooh, also interesting. And then I realized I had been translating like most of the things. So it's like, you know what, fuck it, I will just translate the whole thing.
Julian could probably tell that exact same story from a million different things. I'm so appreciative of everything y'all do, because it's not something I can do, and I don't think it's something I would be good at either. I think I would probably be stuck in my own head, and I would chicken out a million times more than what you just described as well. I would just run away from that kind of stuff. It's not my forte, so I'm always very impressed by folks who can do that.
Fortunately, my translation style, when I went to college, my teachers and especially my classmates always encouraged me to be creative with the way you translate. Yeah. And also, I actually subtitled some series just for myself, because I liked seeing stuff with subtitles.
Yeah.
And whenever I asked, I was like super young. So whenever I asked my mother, she always went and tried to get as creative and as natural as possible. So after my mother and all of my classmates drilled that feeling into me, I right now I'm not even able to translate something that sounds really stiff and unnatural.
I want to throw Julian under the bus a little bit, because the thing that's live right now is actually something that you did a passover on, Julian. Like I mentioned, he had done this years ago, the vast majority of it. It's a column from the final Kanzenshuu. I call it Kanzenshuu 10. So it was the 10th one, but it's a supplemental volume, TV animation part 3, which is also a misnomer because they cover the 10th anniversary movie and so much other stuff in that Kanzenshuu. Anyway, it's called Animation's Gleanings, which is a strange title. There's just lots of cool tidbits, and I always wanted to have it up. And like I said, Julian did a good part of it, but I wanted all of the captions because I felt like those brought out some of the tidbits as well. And so you did a pass over this. What was it like going through someone else's work for that pass and then adding your own? So there's a couple things there. It's like learning the house translation style in some ways, but also knowing that Julian had done it years ago and there were some things that he would have done differently, which you did change, such as It Can't Be Helped, that we changed in there.
Yeah.
So tell me about that process.
So basically, it's kind of hard when you have to actually grab someone's translation, especially when that someone is Julian, because it's Julian.
Yeah.
And then, so when I thought, like, I was reading it, and I thought, maybe I could rephrase this. I mean, the contents were all fine. They were super fine.
And it was clearly a first pass for him too. Like, yeah. There's definitely things that even at that time, I feel like he probably would have rephrased, but just didn't get around to doing it.
Exactly. I mean, every time I try to review my own translations, I always change stuff. So
yeah,
it's basically the translator's curse. You will never be 100% satisfied.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially when it's someone else, it's since you have that external perspective that I was mentioning before, it's a little bit easier to maybe be a little bit more detached from it, just because you weren't the one that did it before.
Yeah.
Even then, it's like it's still someone else's work, so I wanted to make very sure that I was careful in the way I handled it, and whatever I didn't need to change, I didn't. Even if it would be a little bit closer to my own personal style, I just like, this is perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine phrase. If I don't need to change it, then I won't.
Yeah.
And some things that seemed a little bit stiffer, then I just reworded it a little bit and just put it in another way. But just before I asked Julian's like, you want me to just leave it as it is, or you want me to just make a pass on the whole thing? And you were like, yeah, sure. If you want to change it up a little bit, you can go for it. And so I was like, okay then.
What'd you think of that column?
I mean, it was. I especially liked the parts about the voices.
Yeah.
Because they actually gathered together all of the characters that one single voice actor did. And I know that Joji Yanami did a lot of voices, and then they got to the part about Kenji Utsumi, and it only had, I don't remember who it had, but I think it did have not as many characters as it could have, especially considering that we had the Dr. Slump crossover in Dragon Ball itself.
Right, sure.
So I was like, no. then I put the translator's note, Kenji Utsumi is also our very own Senbei Norimaki. I thought it was like super interesting. I actually had no idea that it was also Hiro Mitsuru that voiced Baby Trunks.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up, is that's the kind of thing that's uncredited. And I think she may have mentioned that in like a Landmark or a Forever interview or something like that. But those are the only sources for, she's the one who played Baby Trunks. That's so cool.
And I thought it was like super interesting to figure out the relationship between the characters and their voice actors. And also the very final part where they talk about how they actually compose the cells, so they don't it's possible that they don't make it all just in one cell, so they just put different parts on top of each other together. So they even say specifically sometimes you might even get a bald Goku. And I thought it was super funny.
It's very cool. Yeah. That's why I say like the title of it's a little misleading, because it's about animation, but it's also about voices and like even behind the scenes stories. This is where we get the tidbit that at some point in very early pre-production, obviously it never went anywhere, but they considered having Bardock be an enemy for Goku to face. Like, okay. One little line in one column in one Kanzenshuu. That's all we get about that, but that's the source for it. So I guess let's briefly talk about some other stuff you're doing for the site, kind of like at large. So some long form translations, those are coming. That's really awesome. I initially wanted to bring you in for, like I said, just like little one sentences here, wiki stuff, and you just kind of ran with everything. But tell me about some little wiki things you've been doing, because it's not even just translation stuff that you're doing on the wiki either. You have really adopted our work ethic and our dedication, and it's really something, man.
I mean, since my official role here is as wiki editor, I thought, you know what? Let me do something to actually earn that title. And the only thing I could think of, besides translating stuff that I could contribute, was because I was about to read the Super manga for the very first time.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what would be interesting? It's like having a list of all the differences between the anime and the manga, just because that would be the kind of thing that I would want to read.
Yeah.
So you know what? I want to do some actual wiki editing, so I will just do it myself. And then I found out that Teres already had written quite a lot of them. But you know what? I will just do more. And I every time I read a manga chapter, I just grabbed my notes and I just wrote down the notes. And then the next day, whenever I had some time, I just wrote them down and then put them on the wiki.
Here's kind of the big question, and I wish I asked more of our folks this question, because I'm really curious. Why do you do it?
Very nice question.
Because we're just fans. This is just some series that we watched and we read and we liked. I feel like I need to reiterate fairly often for folks. Kanzenshu's not a job. Kanzenshuu doesn't generate income. Kanzenshuu does not run ads. The forum has some little ads that don't cover the cost of even keeping it online, but whatever. It offsets a little bit for me. Julian, Heath, myself, we do it because we feel like we like it's in our blood. We've been doing it for so long. We have to do this, and it makes us happy to do it. Why do you do it?
Well, as I was telling you before, there was a point in my fandom where my love for Dragon Ball kind of dwindled down a little bit. But every time I grabbed a manga to read it again, I just cannot read that manga and not feel the exact same excitement all over again. Dragon Ball is just this kind of series that even if I grow apart from it for some time, every time I come back, it's always there to welcome me with open arms. And it's just such a wonderful tale of adventure, and it's just packed full of emotion and camaraderie. And if you look closely, you can even learn some life lessons from it. Maybe, even though Toriyama repeatedly says that he made it just for entertainment.
Yeah, he's an idiot. He's wrong. Don't listen to him.
But I do really think that he sells himself short, not only in the script writing department, but also the drawing department. And it's Dragon Ball as a manga is one of the very few manga that you can you're not really even reading it at a point, because it just flows so well. You feel like you're watching an anime that just happens not to have any voice.
Yeah.
But it's just absolutely amazing. And every time I come back to it, I just fall in love all over again. And then when I just found out your website and all the things that you were doing, and it's like, oh my God, there's all of these things behind this show that I already liked. And there's also the great video games that Bandai does, like Budokai 1, which until Fighters and Kakarot was like my favorite Dragon Ball game, because it's just made with so much love and passion. I can almost cry every time I reach the end of story mode and they play that beautiful instrumental of Chala He Chala as the credits roll. Mm-hmm. And there's just so many things that are wonderful about this franchise, and I love it to death. I just cannot let go of it, even if I try. I couldn't let go of it even if I tried. And to see that the work you are doing is just the fruit of so much passion, and that you're actually trying to get things right, to get things consistent, to actually know what the origins of things are, like all of the character name puns and stuff like that. You keep saying that you want to be the source for everything. You don't want people to have to go to some other website to check some other thing. No, if you go to Kanzenshuu, you have everything. And I was like, damn, that's the kind of perfectionism I can get behind.
Perfectionism, neurosis, egotism, arrogance. Yes, this is all true. This is all accurate. Sure.
I have been called a little bit neurotic, so it suits me just fine.
As long as we're aware of it and admit to it, I think it's healthy, right?
I guess so. I'm a massive Persona fan, and one thing that 4 tells you to is that you will go stronger. You will become stronger if you just admit your own faults to yourself. So
yeah, for sure.
I guess we're all just like super strong now.
Well, I think this was a lovely introduction to you, to some of the stuff that you're doing with us, for us. I love everything. And what's really fun about this conversation right now is that there have been many times where I've brought someone on and it's like, hey, I'm talking to you for the first time. I don't know what my camaraderie with you is going to be like. This will be an interesting podcast episode. Where I'm going with this is not only have you been working with us for months on this kind of crap, every Saturday night we play Mario Kart, and you decided to join us from Portugal for not every week, but you're there fairly often, to the point that we know you are the drunk samurai. So there's a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of stories being told. So what I want to put out there is, it's been so long actually since we've done a podcast episode. If you want extra podcast like material, come hang out with us Saturday nights. And we're playing Mario Kart, but we're mostly just bullshitting. And sometimes we talk about podcasts or Dragon Ball stuff and website stuff, but most of the time we're just having a good time. We're chatting. So you can follow us and hang out over there. That's on my personal Twitch. And I don't know, I've collected some Dragon Ball things from some of those sessions. I have yet to decide what I'm going to do with that audio material. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. We've been chatting for a while. This is great. I love this. Zenpai. What else do you want to toss out there?
First of all, that I'm sorry that I haven't been on Mario Kart for so long. I really wanted
for that.
I really wanted to come back last Saturday, but then I had my cousin's graduation ceremony, so it's like, maybe it would be useful if I wasn't completely groggy with sleep.
Yeah,
so sorry, guys. It had to be next time.
I know. Mary wanted to talk to you about Persona.
Yeah, I actually, just before I went to bed, I just thought, let me check what they're doing on the stream, and then exactly as I turned on the stream, I heard, "Oh, so where is Senpai?" It's like, and you said, "Oh, he couldn't come today." I said, "Oh, I wanted to get his assessment. I wanted to get words."
She wrapped up royal, so she's got words to have with you, I think.
And yeah, I mean, as long as you keep giving me stuff to translate, I will keep on translating them. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there too. I haven't done a podcast in 3-4 months, so I don't remember how to do this. So it's going to take me a little bit. I'm recording this real early in the week and hoping to get it out next week. So give myself plenty of time to do this. www.kanzenshuu.com. That is kanzenshuu.com. At the time we're talking, I think the most recent thing on the homepage is still the Animation Gleanings translation, so you can check that out. We'll see if by the time this goes live, if I can get the Torishima translation. Well, it's not just Torishima. It's like it's a translation of a panel from, what was it, like Unite Tokyo 2019. It turns out it's actually part 2 of a 3-part series. Maybe we'll go back and do the others. She said one of the parts isn't actually that interesting. It's just kind of like a history of the games or something.
I will check it out. Enough. If I think there's something of value in there, I will just translate it either way.
I love everyone. Everyone's so good. All right. So that's the site. These are the folks. Again, my name is Mike, VegettoEX. Kanzenshuu.com. Follow us there. I'll link the Twitters if you want to follow us there. Come watch Mario Kart Saturday nights for extra dumb content. And I'll leave it there. I do have more podcast episodes planned. This is hopefully one of those, semi-annual. Mike decides he wants to get back into the groove of podcasting and sees how long he can schedule things out and get back into that groove. But I mean, you can probably say from your totally unbiased perspective, just because there's no podcast going up doesn't mean that no one's doing anything. It's actually insane right now. I need to say this, I think, a little more publicly and a little more prevalently, but Therese could stop working on things right now, and she would have already contributed more to the Dragon Ball fan community than 99.9 repeating % of other people.
Definitely. I actually told her that myself.
It's wait till you folks see what we have in store for you. I know we've been saying that for years, but again, we work on the long-term timeline. We don't work in internet time. We work in real time, coming your way at some point. All right. I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. I don't know how to end a podcast because it's been too long. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Senpai, we gotta get you a good race.
Finally. It's been awful today. It's like, I don't know why, I always manage to start super well. It's like, yeah, this is the time. It's like, one mistake. Nope.
Yeah, one mistake early on especially will get you. I think it's a little more lenient later on.
Yeah.
I wish it was an option to do, like, 6-lap races. I think that would really change things a lot, too.
Actually, yeah. Because you can change the amount of races you do, but not the amount of laps.
Right.
Mary just mixed Scotch and Bailey's, and I think we need to have words.
It was not a good idea.
No.
I thought it was like a mixing kind of... Anyway, no. It just was not good.
That sounds about as good as the time I mixed tequila and Diet Mountain Dew.
Oh,
Ew.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I literally just shivered.
Yeah. That's correct.
And it wasn't just regular Baileys, it was red velvet Baileys. It's a beautiful, beautiful pink color that I've just absolutely butchered. Never again.
I think the only time I drank like super weird mixed stuff was also the only time I actually got super hammered
There you go.
in my entire life.
What would you?
Which-
What did you mix?
It's like I didn't mix anything because I'm not really big on alcohol, to be honest. But I was at a party with my friends and they kept mixing stuff for me with vodka. So I basically the cups were super small, so I just drank 6 of them. And by the time I realized it, I went to the bathroom and I was like, "Wait, was the floor always this slanted?" It was like, and then my friends kept making fun of me the next day. And then I told him, "Yeah, but at least I remember everything." And they said, "Do you remember the time when you started talking to us in Japanese?" And I was like, "What?"
Nani?
So yeah, basically they still make fun of me to this day as the samurai drunk.
Nice.
Excellent.
Worst things you could be.
Yeah, I guess so.